Good Wednesday morning, people. I was just fixing my hair. You guys caught me fixing my hair right before I started. Okay, so we just have a little bit left to do before our test tomorrow. So I'm going to go back to page 10, even though we did that yesterday, and kind of make sure that, because it was at the end of the hour and everybody's getting ready to go, and I just want to make sure that we got everything that we needed on page 10. Um, Again, make sure that you understand that the Glorious Revolution, not democratic, it just sets up a constitutional monarchy mostly between Parliament and the monarch, not necessarily giving a constitution to the people. Power remained largely in the hands of the nobility, so that's not going to change, and gentry until the 19th century. And again, that's the way that it is across most of Europe. However, England is still going, or Great Britain, I should say now, is still the most democratic nation in Europe and will remain that way for quite some time. Toleration Acts granted the right to worship for Protestant nonconformists, like Puritans, although they could not hold office. So Puritans were allowed to worship, but they couldn't hold any office, which means nothing's going to change for them, right? Because they can't help their situation if there's no one in Parliament that will change laws for them. Did not extend religious liberties to Catholics, Jews, or Unitarians. And then the Act of Settlement. That's kind of where we ended and kind of I rushed through. This is really important because what's going to happen is William and Mary not going to have any children. And poor Queen Anne, she's going to have like 22 pregnancies and only one child that lives and has some kind of form of brain disorder like encephalitis or something, and he's going to die as well. So she's a very tragic queen. But because neither one of them have children, the crown then goes into Hanover, which is German, the German states, and we'll get a German king, that's the Georges, that will be sitting on the throne as George the First, George the Second, George the Third, and of which Queen Elizabeth is related. That's her great people. All right. Now we're on to new stuff on page 11, the Act of Union. And this is what I said at the beginning of this set of notes, that James the First, who rules and reigns after Elizabeth the First, was also James the Sixth, the King of Scotland. And so in 1707, the Act of Union united England and Scotland into Great Britain. So for those of you that are particularly interested in all the different ways that England and those islands are referred to, there's really three names: England, which is just England proper; Great Britain, which is England and Scotland; and then the UK, which is the proper form that is called today, it's the United Kingdom, is all of that: England, Scotland, Wales, all the little teeny islands out, the Isle of Man, Isle of Shetland, and then Northern Ireland. So that's the UK. Why would Scotland agree to give up its independence? Well, they didn't really necessarily have a choice, but they needed trade. They needed access. They needed to be brought out of a lot of economic the economic disparity. They don't have an economy. They don't have trade. They wanted to trade with England and be part of that. And within a few decades, Scotland transformed into a modern society as a result of that. On also page 11, the cabinet system, the development of politics after the Glorious Revolution will give us a cabinet, and it will give us a prime minister. Robert Walpole is viewed as the first prime minister in British history. You just kind of need to know that. It pops up every now and then. It's important to know. A prime minister is not a president. So the way a prime minister is elected, and this is the same way that it's done today in the 21st century, prime minister is in control of Parliament, and the prime minister works directly with the king or queen, which is why it's a really important role, which always makes me mad when people say Queen Elizabeth II doesn't do anything. She still meets with the prime minister, and they still conduct business every day. Maybe not every day, but regularly. So the prime minister is elected within the body of Parliament. So the people of England or Great Britain or the United Kingdom do not elect a prime minister. They elect people into Parliament. And then what happens in Parliament is whichever political party is the largest or has the largest voting bloc, that party puts forward the name for the prime minister. So Robert Walpole is the first. And I'm not always sure why they want you to know this, but it is important. Leads the cabinet for about 20 years, which is a long time to do that. Established precedent that the cabinet was responsible. The king's role, King George I will be the first Hanoverian king. He speaks German and not English very well, which would be a problem. George II discontinued the practice of meeting. Both kings can't speak English very well, right? They're German, and that seems to be a problem. And as a result, not the best kings. King George will be the king during the American Revolution, which again didn't go very well for England. So that takes care of England. And now we're going to move into our last area of constitutionalism, some kind of democracy, and this is the Dutch. The College Board love this group of people because they have such a small role in history. A lot of AP Euro teachers kind of just brush over this and brush over them, but they're really important. They play a really important role, historically speaking, mostly because of what they do in the rest of the time period, because the country is small, but they have a really big impact. So it's the United Provinces of the Netherlands, the Dutch, Holland, Amsterdam, all of those places are going to be the Netherlands or the Dutch. First half of the 17th century is the Golden Age, meaning this is the time period. God, this necklace is bothering me. Sorry. Let me get it right. This is a time period that the Dutch will be very prosperous. They will have an impact, and it's their Golden Age. And it is mostly around the idea of trade and wealth, and a lot of other things that are really important. The government was dominated by the middle class, whose wealth and power limited the power of the state. So this is a country that's run by the middle class, not a strong absolutist king, not by a strong government, but by a group of men who are businessmen. And that is what makes this place really unique. Government was run by representatives. So at the top of page 12, government consisted of an organized confederation of 7 provinces, each with a representative government. So these have many layers of government. Each province sent a representative. So this is really like states. If you want to think of like Holland, like the United States of America, we have strong government and everybody sends representatives from every state. And that's kind of what this was like. Holland and Zeeland, 2 richest. Each province elected a stadtholder, which is a governor or a leader, and all 7 provinces would elect the same and everything would work out. So the Dutch Republic in the middle of page 12 is what you need to put a big box around. This is what is continually asked on AP exams time and time again, is this idea of religious toleration. And it is really religiously tolerant. And we have to figure out, why were they religiously tolerant? We'll get to that. So the Dutch Republic was characterized by religious toleration. When we say that, that means this religious toleration oversaw everything that was happening in this area. Calvinism was dominant, so most everybody in this area was Calvinist, but they allowed everybody. Catholics, Jews had the same toleration, not a lot of rights, but toleration. This will be where Puritans will come when they're persecuted and chased out of England. They're going to come and stay at Holland. Interesting note that the Puritans that come to North America come from Holland, not from England. So that's also interesting to note when we get to U.S. history next year. Religious toleration enabled the Netherlands to foster a cosmopolitan society that promoted, underline, trade. So why were the Dutch religiously tolerant? Because all they cared about was making money. They don't care. Come to Holland, come to the Netherlands, come to Zeeland, come to Amsterdam. We don't care what faith you are. If you make us money, that's awesome. So that's why we look at the Dutch differently than we look at everybody else, because They overlooked religion to make money. Other states saw religion and conformity as a way to make money, and they are sadly mistaken, because the Dutch, they did it right. Because if you look at the next letter D, the Netherlands become the greatest mercantile nation of the 17th century. Mercantile is business. They become the greatest business nation in the 17th century. And they're teeny tiny. They can't even make anything. They don't make much. They don't have agriculture because everything's under the water. So how do they do this? Well, Amsterdam becomes the banking and commercial center of Europe. You need to underline that because for whatever reason, again, I like to ask you that question a lot. It's the center of banking. It's the Wall Street. And just forward thinking, I mean, hopefully you know New York City is founded by the Dutch. Wall Street is an Amsterdam thing in New Amsterdam, in what eventually becomes New York. The richest city in Europe offered far lower interest rates than English Bank, and the major reason that banking was its dominance. Had to rely on commerce because it had few natural resources. It really doesn't have natural resources. So they have to figure out how are we going to make money. And commerce is banking, commerce is industry, commerce is how do you make money? That's what that word commerce means. So what they did was they were on the water, so they built ships. They built lots and lots of ships because they're on the water. They have lots of ports. And so what they did was they moved other people's stuff. They did not have government controls, monopolies that interfere with free trade, like in France, with the government trying to hold tight to the economy. Netherlands said, hold on loosely. It's a song. And business is going to flourish. And it does. It flourishes. The Netherlands become what's known, and I would write this somewhere at the top maybe of page 13. They become known as the carrying nation. Carrying meaning they carry other people's things. This is the semi-tractor trailer nation with ships. That's all they're doing, is they are moving other people's goods and getting fabulously wealthy doing it. Fishing will be one of the things that they can do. Obviously, they're on the water, so fishing is the cornerstone. But their major industries included textile, furniture, fine woolen goods, sugar refining, tobacco cutting, brewing, pottery, glass, printing, paper making. But all of that stuff is after the fact because they don't have any of these natural resources. They don't have wood to make cabinets, so they've got to get wood from someplace else. They don't have any agriculture, zero. They can't grow anything. Eventually, they're going to grow tulips, but we'll talk about that later. So they invent this thing called the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company. And these will be private industries. And again, these things will become incredibly wealthy and give the Dutch great wealth. Their foreign policy leads to an independence. War with France and England will damage them somewhat. One of their ways of fighting the wars were to open the dams and just flood the fighting area so nobody could fight because they certainly did not have an army that could match the French and or the English. So they just kind of flooded areas or waited till the troops marched and then opened up dams and flooded, which works a time or two, but it also causes great destruction to your own country. And then lastly, a little quick look at Sweden, and you can read that. We don't talk about Sweden at all. All right, so that takes us through two really dense chapters that we are testing on tomorrow. So make sure that you go back, look back at Baroque art, look back at the Dutch art and their practice of displaying wealth in their paintings with middle class. That when you think of the Dutch, you should always think strong middle class, wealth, and religious toleration, okay? Go back and review the 30 Years' War. You won't need to know the phases of the war, but you're certainly going to need to know about that last phase when Cardinal Richelieu intervenes. Make sure you know everything you can possibly cram into your head about Louis XIV and absolutist France. And again, it's always a good idea on page 14 to look at those essay questions and to answer them either mentally or with bullet points, that is the best way to study. For those of you still struggling on how do I study for these tests, answering these essay questions really are the best, and not necessarily writing them out, but just answering them with bullet points. All right. So have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you here tomorrow for test day. And then we just have test corrections on Friday. Then it's fall break. So yay. All right. Have a great day, peeps. See ya tomorrow. Email me if you have any questions. Bye.